This is my video on how good discarding is in every card game. Discarding. So discarding is a very commonly used cost amongst many card games because it is an easy and simple way to convert the cards that you currently have in hand into some other form of resource. Cards like Thirst for Knowledge allow you to trade your 2 cards in hand or 1 artifact card for 3 cards off the top of your deck. Chamber of Viscidus lets you look at 3 cards in your hand, pick 1 to discard, and then draw 2 new cards to replace it. Professor's Reachers forces you to discard all the cards in your hand and rewards you with a new 7 cards. And Graceful Charity lets you draw 3 cards and then discard 2 cards of your choice. So, many of these cards have a cost of discarding cards. However, oftentimes in games, as they progress, that cost becomes more of a benefit. Sometimes even the benefit of discarding cards eclipses the benefit of drawing the new cards to replace them. So my question is, how good is it to discard cards in every card game? First, I want to talk about Magic the Gathering. So in Magic the Gathering, there's a very famous card called the Faithless Looting, which says you draw 2 cards and then you discard 2 cards for 1 mana. So how good is the discard from this card in Magic the Gathering? My answer is that it's very good. Having the ability to discard cards enables one of the main uses for discard in every format of Magic the Gathering, Reanimator. Reanimator is named after the Reanimate spell, which says you can put a creature from your graveyard into play under your control, and then you lose life equal to its cost. This lets you get creatures into play for much lower mana cost than you would normally have to pay for them by using a spell like Reanimate to bring it back for cheap. This also scales with other formats, meaning that there are other forms of Reanimate that you can play. Reanimate, only legal in the oldest formats of Legacy, however Goryo's Vengeance is played commonly in Modern to bring back creatures for a slightly higher cost than Reanimate. In Standard, you have cards like Virtue of Persistence, which lets you bring back creatures for free at the beginning of each upkeep. However, the cost is substantially higher than cards like Goryo's or Reanimate. This way, Magic can kind of scale the power level of Reanimate in different formats. And it also forces time to set up, meaning that your opponent has time to interact with you. They can interact with the Reanimate spell itself by countering it in some way or killing the creature that you bring back. They can react to the creature going to your graveyard, being discarded by cards like Faithless Looting, or they can completely stop you from discarding cards altogether by countering the discard spell when you cast it. Whilst discarding cards for Reanimator is a good strategy if you ask me for the health of the game, there are alternative strategies which use discard, which are less healthy because they have less interaction points overall. For example, they have very degenerate strategies that require a large number of discarded cards to have an extremely powerful early game effect. Cards like Breakthrough in the older formats let you draw 4 cards and then discard the rest of your hand. You could pay X to not discard cards, but generally you're going to play 1 blue, draw 4 cards, and then put your whole hand in the discard pile. This activates effects like Basking Root Wall's Madness ability, letting you cast it for free. Activating cards like Vengevine, which say if you cast a second creature spell per turn, you return Vengevine from your graveyard to the battlefield. Discarding 2 Root Walls activates Vengevine. This also combines well with dredge cards like Golgari Gravetroll, allowing you to mill additional cards every future turn by having a Golgari Gravetroll dredge 6 off the top of your deck when it's in your graveyard. This also combines with cards like Bloodghast, which say whenever you play a land, he comes back into play. All of these different effects trigger Prized Amalgam, which allows it to return from your graveyard to the battlefield if you returned any other creature. And they also help with Bridge from Below, meaning that you can put Bridge from the Belows in your graveyard and then get additional zombie tokens over the course of your game by putting non-token creature cards in your graveyard. This is the danger of having too much graveyard interaction in your game. If you have a lot of cards that rely on things happening when they're in your graveyard, you can have a large mass of creatures coming out extremely early. These large early game boards are extremely hard to handle for almost any deck because they come out so quickly and you cheat so much mana by just having a huge number of cards discarded in the same turn. These are the places where discard can generally be a nuisance for players playing the game. Now I'm going to talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! So a card like Gates of the Dark World lets you banish a Fiend-type monster from your graveyard once per turn, and then discard a Fiend-type monster to draw a card. So my question is, how good is it to discard a card from your hand in Yu-Gi-Oh! It's good in many archetypes. Yu-Gi-Oh! Plays around a lot with discard, and is a great way to get rid of extra cards that are clogging up your hand or do not serve any useful purpose in your hand when you draw them. Cards like Destiny Draw, which lets you discard a Destiny Hero card from your hand to draw 2 cards, pair perfectly with cards like Destiny Hero Malicious, which only has an effect if you banish it from your graveyard, meaning that if you have a Destiny Hero Malicious in your hand, it is functionally useless unless you can find some way to discard it, like Destiny Draw. There's also specific interactions which benefit a lot from having cards that you really want to discard put into your hand. For example, Fiendsmith's Tract adds a light fiend monster from your deck to your hand and then forces you to discard one card. But a light fiend monster that you can add is Fabled Lurry, which says when it is discarded to the graveyard, you special summon it to play. Meaning that Fiendsmith's Tract can basically read as put a Fabled Lurry from your deck into play, or can read as doing something else if you don't want to discard Fabled Lurry or want to get a different light fiend monster, which provides you a lot of flexibility in the card's usage. This also helps with the overlap with graveyard effects. Destiny here Malicious, while it is a graveyard effect, does not require it to be discard to be used, meaning that cards that have graveyard effects benefit from having discard in the deck, as well as other ways to send them to the yard from deck. This flexibility with the ways to use discard in different archetypes helps it overlap to several different archetypes in Yu-Gi-Oh! Overall. This way, it can get used in many different archetypes in many different ways, even if it isn't the core of the archetype that you're using. Cards like Fabled Cerberus or Beige Vanguard of the Dark World have specific effects that benefit from being discarded, meaning that these archetypes generally revolve around discarding cards from your hand. However, there are also many neutral enablers which allow both of these discard-focused decks and non-discard-focused decks to take advantage of cards like this. Cards like the Dangers, which discard a random card from your hand and then have a special effect if the danger is specifically discarded. Or Super Polymerization, which is just a powerful interaction tool that also forces you to discard a card, giving you the ability to gain advantage from cards like Cerberus or Beige or other discard effects that you could run in your deck. This makes a discard a very easily splashable effect amongst many decks. If you already have in-archetype cards that want to be discarded, or in-archetype cards that force you to discard, there are many options on both halves of the spectrum for what to add into your deck to take advantage of that discard, making it a very unique effect and a very good effect in tons of Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks. Now for Hearthstone. So Hearthstone, you have a card like Soulfire, which deals 4 damage and forces you to discard a random card. So how good is discarding a card in Hearthstone? It's really bad. Discarding a card in Hearthstone is always totally random, meaning that if you were to discard the most crucial part of your strategy, you would probably lose that game. This way, cards like Doomguard have to have a super duper powerful effect to be worth discarding 2 cards at random from your hand. Oftentimes, discarding cards is only good when you can avoid discarding the card altogether by having no cards in your hand at the time you play the card, which forces you to discard. Cards like Succubus and Lakari Fellhound would be super powerful because they're above stats for the cost, but the forcing of you having to discard a card from your hand, or 2 cards in the case of Lakari Fellhound, means that you not only lose value on playing those cards, but they also force you to have a gamble of which cards you're going to end up discarding overall. This mechanic needed a lot of help and wasn't seen very much in the early days of Hearthstone because of how painful it was to discard a card. Now, when I said the mechanic needed help, they certainly got a lot of help over the course of the years. Discard payoffs over time in Hearthstone only ramped up more and more. It started with cards like Silverware Golem, which benefited you from discarding it by summoning it, Clutch Mother Zavis, a card that you can discard multiple times and get stat buffs, High Priestess Jeklik, which is a card that you can discard and then becomes easier to discard because it duplicates itself in your hand, cards like Malchusar Simp, which basically nullify the cost of discarding a card by giving you the card that you discarded back. All of these cards, despite the fact that they help discard a lot, it never was really a great mechanic to play in Standard simply because all of these cards weren't legal in Standard at the same time, making it hard to take advantage of discarding cards over and over again if you don't have all of the elements. However, this continually helped the deck to become a powerful enabler in Wild, not to mention that there were Wild-specific cards like Chamber of Viscidus, which I mentioned earlier, which helped the Wild decks have a critical mass of discard cards. This was so powerful with cards like Soul Barrage dealing a random amount of damage when discarded from your hand that Cataclysm, previously a card that forced you to discard all the cards in your hand, got nerfed to discarding 2 cards in hand because there were so many powerful discard enablers in Wild. Discarding your entire hand for 4 mana was too strong, even minus the board destroying effect that came with the Cataclysm overall. Now for Pokemon. So Pokemon has a super played card called Ultra Ball, which lets you discard 2 cards from your hand and then search your deck for any Pokemon and put in your hand. So how good is discarding 2 cards to Ultra Ball in Pokemon? It's really great. There's a huge upside for discard cards in Pokemon, such as Ultra Ball, which lets you get any Pokemon card in the whole game from your deck and put it into your hand. We got cards like Professor's Research, which force you to discard your whole hand, however give you 7 cards back. If you play this card as the last card in your hand, it's effectively draw 7 cards at no cost to yourself, except for being the supporter that you play for turn. It is useful in all sorts of decks, and because these effects are so powerful and useful, they see play in basically every deck in the game, even if they don't need the discard that comes associated with them. This, however, leads to decks like Lugia V-Star and Regidrago V-Star that have abilities that are beneficial from having cards in your graveyard, seeing tons of play and being some of the strongest decks in the metagame, because discard comes with these super powerful cards that almost every deck will end up playing anyway. Not to mention, if you need additional discard, cards like Squawkability EX see play, which allow you to discard your hand and draw 6 cards, similar to Professor's Research. However, it only works on your first turn. However, these effects are so strong that even if the card only works one time per game, these cards still see play to enable these powerful strategies. It is easy to enable multiple strategies with these type of discard effects, meaning that you can use discard to both enable graveyard focus decks, but also other decks that don't have such a focus and just would rather cycle through cards to get to their powerful pieces. These many applications of the discard element in Pokemon give them a lot of flexibility in different archetypes that they want to give it to. For example, Turbo Energy discard decks require a lot of discarded energy, so Surge EX and Gardevoir EX, which are both Pokemon that both benefit from discarding energy, can take advantage of similar cards, sending lots of energy to the discard pile at the same time to activate their powerful attacks and abilities. This also helps enable strong and fast attackers using other cards like Professor Sada's Vitality, attaching energy from your discard pile to ancient Pokemon you have in play, such as Raging Bolt EX, another ancient card which also benefits from having extra energy attached. These two cards form a simple combo of you playing Ultra Ball to discard your 2 energy, getting a Raging Bolt EX, and then you can Professor Sada's Vitality to attach those energy that you had discarded. Easy access to many cards that are otherwise hard to get is another benefit of both the powerful front sides of discard cards, like drawing extra cards or searching for Pokemon, but it is also a benefit of discarding the cards that you currently have and have no need for. Cards like Palpad and Super Rod are very commonly played in the game and let you shuffle supporters or basic energy and Pokemon into your deck. After you have already gone through a lot of your deck, this allows you to reuse cards that you have discarded that you may have not needed at the time and would only need further down the game when it is closer to the late game and you are trying to finish off your opponent. In conclusion, it's pretty clear to me that discard is a super powerful mechanic and feels great to use in almost all of the card games. Cards like Regidrago, which benefit from having cards in your discard pile, makes it feel great when you discard a dragon and you can use that large attack. Cards like Malcozar's make it feel really good when you discard a card because it churns through your deck and gets you some more important cards that you may need later down the line. Cards like Fable Lurry and Brasking Rootwaller are both examples of small creatures that you can get out for basically no cost if you discard them, making you feel rewarded when you draw the card with your discard outlet and get to put them into play for no cost at all. From weak effects to strong effects, they can really vary the level of payoffs on discard cards by printing specific discard enablers and discard outlets. This is a great and flexible tool for card games designers to use in all sorts of card games, meaning that you can use it to have super powerful discard decks or super weak discard decks or anything in between. This is a great mechanic and I think lots of designers should use it in all sorts of card games. Thanks for watching my video. Let me know in the comments about discard in other card games that you play. I really love the counterplay from Magic and from Hearthstone, where the discard is more focused on specific archetypes, whereas in Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! It's a little more freeform and sees play in a lot of different style of decks. Also, remember to like and subscribe so that way I can make more content like this one. About 6% of the people who watch my content are actually subscribed, and getting that number up will not only help me make more content like this one, but will also help me improve the content and make more videos for viewers like you to watch over and over again. So thanks for watching and stay tuned for more.